Yes, hi, my name is Thomas. I'm the only guy here who's not on stage because of my merits, but because I'm actually paying for for this. I hope you'll stick with me anyway, and that I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm trying to tell you something interesting. So my first slide here is programming is pain and suffering, and I think that most of you will nod to that statement in some regard at least. And I actually changed my title. It was Avoiding the Nightmare on Elm Street to Elm, oh my god, what the fuck have we done? It should be. And it should actually be, what the fuck were we thinking when we decided to choose this technology? Because this is a talk about choosing tech when starting a new project. And it should be maybe not so much what the fuck were we thinking, but what were we actually thinking at the time of making that decision? So this is me. I work for Trifork and Humio. I've been doing web development for the past 7, 8 years or so, and I have I'm very interested in functional programming languages, and that kind of attracted me to Elm as a language. So this is not going to be a talk about Elm in particular, but it's going to be a talk about, as I said, choosing technologies and why we decided to choose Elm. So who here knows Elm? That's about the same number of people as use WebVR, it seems, and so about 0.5% of the room. It's good because it doesn't matter. This is not a talk about Elm. But Elm at a glance is that it's a typed functional language, right? It's based on ML. It's not a C or Java or anything like that that's conventional. It's just like TypeScript and so on. It's something that compiles to JavaScript so it can run in the browser. Hopefully soon, even WebAssembly. It's made from the ground up to be a front-end language, so that it has features that caters towards doing front-endish things. This is maybe something a bit novel for a JavaScript developer at least, that there are no runtime errors. That means when it runs, it runs. It doesn't crash, ever. You don't get like runtime exceptions that says, oh, null pointer exception or anything like that. And it's very fast. So this is what it looks like. It doesn't seem like JavaScript, and it's even, to some extent, people would say it has an esoteric feel, right? It's like alien compared to what we're used to. So, but just to set the stage, as I said, I work for a company called Humio, and what we do is we do a log aggregation and monitoring tool, right? So if you know Splunk or Kibana or or tools like that, it's in that category, right? And it's a technology stack of Scala, Akka, Kafka, and Elm, right? And we've been around for about a year, so it's a startup, and we have about 40,000 lines of Elm, and that's the second biggest Elm code base in the world, I was told a couple of weeks ago. So just to give you an impression of the kind of problems that we had, this is the product, right? It's a place where you can search for a text string, and it's going to find the logs across your infrastructure that had that string, and you can then do string manipulations and grep and arc and all kinds of operations on it to find some interesting information when shit hits the fan, and you got to look in the logs. That's what we do. So you can see there's a lot of information streaming out, right? This is actually a relatively small number. It's only 172,000. We're easily in the hundreds of millions of events that we deal with, and they get streamed to the front end. So we have to be really fast, and we have to be able to transform data as it streams in and so on. So it puts a lot of work on the front end. So we had to find a tool that would match that, right? And we do charts and so on. So the initial reaction that people have when I tell them, oh, we built this thing in Elm. Oh, are you guys crazy? Wow, that's so awesome. What the hell were you thinking, choosing a new technology like Elm? This is like, you're going to have a bunch of problems, right? How do you even hire people? No one knows Elm. Like, just look in this room. We have a room full of developers, and 2 people have used it. So, well, when starting any kind of software project, you are going to have to make tech decisions, right? And how do you make tech decisions? Well, the considerations that we had was that, as I said, we have high volumes of data. We want to do a lot of transformations to make it look cool and so on. We want to remain very interactive while we were using the tool, but data is streaming out and we're doing calculations. We had a distributed team. We had a certain company culture that we're very language geeks, so it had to fit with that as well. And we have dashboards, like these things, that sit on the walls of companies all day long. Like, they have tens of these monitors on the wall that show, has stuff gone down, how many database queries have run and so on. And this is on completely dynamic data. It could be anything. So we don't want this to crash. We don't want a big red or blue screen of death on the wall, right? And everything stands still. Oh, we've had 200,000 visitors in the past week. We also had that last week. I wonder why that is, right? It's just hung itself. You don't want that. You want it to be updated constantly and not go down without refreshing. The way that you usually pick technologies is that new is always better. I know a lot of people that will say that, at least, right? The normal scenario in the companies that I've been in is more like this. Thomas, you've been picked as the tech lead for this new upcoming project that we're going to build, right? I said, oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to use Cassandra. I'm going to use Kubernetes. I'm going to use Rust, right? It's because that's awesome, and React and Redux. What's the project about, right? So obviously, you got to choose the right and the best tool for the job. But how do you actually determine that? What does best mean? Does it mean mainstream? Does it mean the best performance? Does it mean written in web assembly? Does it mean, that it's easy to write, that there's a lot of documentation, that it fits your culture, that, it's easy to debug, and so on? What does it mean? It's a combination of all these things, right? It has to fit your company. It has to fit the project and what you're trying to do. But no matter which technology you're going to pick, you are going to have pains. Right? You're going to have pains if you choose JavaScript. You're going to have pains if you work with WebGL. You're going to have pains if you write it in C. But they're just different pains. And this was first observed by the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, while he was sitting under his Bodhi tree, that life is suffering. That's the first noble truth. And that, that's in every phase of life. And since we're developers, a big part of our life is programming. And thus, by extension, the modified first noble truth is that all programming is suffering. To program, you must suffer. It is impossible to program without experiencing some kind of suffering. Right? It's the only thing that you can choose is which kind of pain do you want? Right? That's not a very nice choice. But that's all we have. Every choice you make is going to have trade-offs. JavaScript is pain. Anyone who says differently is selling something, right? When I did this talk the first time, I had a long list of facts about JavaScript. You only need a few examples, right? I think Ben already brought it up. What do you get when you add 2 arrays? Well, you get the empty string, of course, right? Not a number is not equal to not a number. And yeah, no, I don't even want to go there. And also, just the fact that a lot of developers actually don't like JavaScript because of these things. So there will be friction just getting people to work with it, at least in my company. But Elm is also painful. It's very painful. Trust me, I've been dealing with it for the past year. The pains are just different. So the code pains in Elm is that you have this esoteric syntax, not mainstream. There's a steep learning curve. It's compiled to just being able to run in the browser, so you can't actually see the code that you wrote running in the browser. That can make things painful, right? It's difficult to write. It takes a long time to actually write the programs, but once they're written, they run really well. So there is that. There's not a lot of tool support because it's new, and actually that's the main thing for us. It's been that being first adopters, that is very painful, right? Lack of documentation and a lot of things that stem from that. So WebAssembly, that's also pain, right? And anyone who says different, well, actually, Ben Smith is selling something. So, but what you just have to do is you gotta think about tech decisions when you have a green field like we had. Look at the problem, try to predict some of the things that the problem or the difficulties that you're gonna meet, and find a technology that matches that, right? So just think of it like a business strategy. I know you're all developers, right? But you should take responsibility for your company when making, not just add a new framework, but think about, would this actually benefit my company in the long run? So think of it as a long-time strategy. But what companies also have to remember is that keeping developers happy and excited about the technologies that they work with, that's a strategy as well. So maybe actually hiring the best talent they will only come in the door if you actually have something exciting for them to work on. So for our problem, or for our product, the problem was all the ones that I listed before, and we tried to match these with what Elm would provide, right? Lots of data transformations. Well, it's got functional language, right? Data transformations is kind of what functional languages do very well. There's high volumes of data. Elm is like extremely fast, very interactive. Well, it's extremely fast. We're a distributed team. A thing about typed languages is that it offers documentation for the developer, right? So rather than writing a lot of prose, you can actually just annotate it with a type, and the compiler will complain if you're using it wrong. And being a distributed team, not sitting next to the guy that you're working with, there's a lot of value in having types. And that we got through Elm, and we wouldn't have gotten that for JavaScript. Company culture, as I said, we're language nerds, so it was a very good fit for us. And dashboards that run all day, they don't crash because there are no runtime exceptions. So the biggest pain that we've had in the past year is definitely being early adopters. Being an early adopter means that when you meet a problem, you're the first person in the world who meets this problem, right? There's not going to be anyone who's written about it on Stack Overflow. There's not going to be, a blog about it. You got to figure this thing out yourself, and that takes time. And it can take, you can sit with a stupid little bug for weeks, and then hopefully you're going to blog about it afterwards, right? But, I think of going into a thing like this as an investment. And in financial investment, there's a concept called the J-curve. And that means that when you go in and you invest very early in a technology or a company, like a startup, like here, you are going to lose money for the first few years. It's going to cost you something. But that initial investment will turn after some time. Usually in financial investment, it's years. For us, we hope that we're over the worst part, now 1 year in, right? It seems to be turning up for us. But we hit our low point down here in October 2016. Those were dark times. This was when Elm, which is an evolving language, we figured out as well, decided to cut about half their features and add some new ones. And unfortunately, that half that they cut away were the ones that we were using. So we had to figure out what the hell to do, and those were some tough months. But we're out of the tar pit now. And we're happy and we're excited about our choice, we get a lot of good publicity just being able to talk about being the second biggest Elm code base in the world, and a lot of people are excited about our project and our product just because it's written in Elm. So there is that. So one of the cool things, if we have time, how much time do you have left? 15 minutes, oh, good. So I'm only going to use about 5, so you can go home and sleep. One of the cool things that you get, right, there are always pros and cons. One of the pros that you get with Elm is that you get a time-traveling debugger, right? And at least we thought so. That's one of the selling points that kind of said, oh, we need this, right? We want this. This is why we chose Elm. And about 2 weeks into the project, it says, yeah, but not when you call JavaScript. And we had to, because not everything is implemented in Elm yet, so we had to make a real-world project. So you can't use that. That doesn't make a good demo today, of course. They have implemented it since, so it does work today. So let's see here. Live coding for the win. Let's see if it works. So I'm starting our application in debug mode. And that actually means that can you see it? Oh no, that's actually a very bad position for the debugger to be, up there. You can see here that you get this little widget inside your application. And if I try to use our application a little bit and get some results and click here and go into fields and see what data we have available for this event, and then go over to settings, and you can see that it's counting up down here. So if I try to open, I should actually look at my screen rather than this screen. That's a lot easier. So if I try to open this debugger window, it actually shows me exactly what has happened through the time that I used my application. Every single state transition, every single click, every single update to the data is available. And this is something called event sourcing, right? It means that you treat every event, every message as something that needs to be put on the queue and then processed by the application. And that allows me to do things like this. So you can see as I'm traveling through time, the UI is updating accordingly. And I can stop at any given point in time and look at, okay, what data was available? What did the application state look like, and so on. That's extremely powerful. Imagine a situation where you have a customer for your new product, and there's like, every other Wednesday when I go into the settings page and click this particular button, nothing happens. So rather than writing that description, they can just say, oh, debug, and when you're done going through this process, you click export. So when I then refresh, and they sent this file to us, then I say import. And hopefully I can find the file. It's right here. All right? And we're back. And I can see exactly what they did, exactly the problems that they had. I was very excited the first time I saw that. So, I didn't do it, so. So, I mean, there's always dangers with cool features as well. One of the things that you get in an ML language is that you get a very, very powerful type inference on the code. And I've sat for, being a front-end developer and having developed for many, many years, the way that I usually code or experiment with my application is just like the VI guys just said. I would write something, and then I would go over into the browser and I would check, did it work? And then I would try something else. Oh, did it work now? And how does that work? And experiment with it and so on. But ever since I've been working in Elm, I've had days where I've sat like 6 hours and not even start my browser doing working on a web app, and someone would say, could you come over and see this cool feature that I've developed? And say, yeah, and then I try to show them in the browser, and what the fuck? Oh, I haven't started the server today. That's that. I don't think a front end developer would normally work this way, but so you get to trust your compiler and maybe a bit too much. That's all I have for today. Any questions?
Well, let's start with an applause for And yes, indeed. Do we have any questions? We have one over here.
Just shout. Or shout in. Don't shout into the microphone.
My question is, I have heard good things about Elm and from very prominent people in community, but
It's fine.
okay. But we see a lot of innovation around ES as well, and if someone need to step in to Elm, or basically not particularly in Elm, but functional programming per se, in context of JavaScript and front end, how good investment do you consider Elm? I mean, because you are saying Elm is good fit because of those goodness, and down the line, if we look at, say, few years, JavaScript is going to get most probably those goodness natively?
Well, no, JavaScript will never be able to do many of the things that you can do in Elm, simply because it's a different language and there are different insurances and so on. I mean, most of the strength, like not having runtime exceptions, you could never have in JavaScript. But sure, I mean, the functional aspects and so on, they get grafted on onto JavaScript. But you have a very broad and mainstream language. If you want something more specialized for a particular use case, right, then you might look into something like this. I mean, you don't have to base your entire product on Elm either, right? You can just make one page, or even, I know that elmlang.com, all the Elm that they have is like the login widget in the corner. So you can just do a little thing and try and see if that works for your application or for your company, right? But there is a steep learning curve, definitely associated with it.
My context was morely partially touching on CoffeeScript as well. For example, many consider it maybe just syntactual things.
That's what it is.
And then
So.
JavaScript natively gets those goodness, and say CoffeeScript is kind of obsolete.
So I mean, yeah. The thing is that you can say that about any language, right? Any Turing complete language you can do anything in, but why not try to pick something that is more appropriate for the task at hand? And of course, I don't know your company, but if you have a certain category of problems, maybe a language is better suited for that category.
Yeah. You're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have another question?
At the bottom?
We have
At the back?
Hi, cool. Elm seems to be interesting, but I can see like most of the newer frameworks that come from Facebook, for example, are solving the same problems. If you have used Redux, for example, you get the time traveling debugger or state rollback.
Oh yeah, I mean this is not something unique to Elm.
Exactly.
I mean the concepts that you have in Redux and React come from Elm. I mean the concepts there were inspired from Elm, but I mean it's not something unique. But writing in a JavaScript still means that you can do things wrong. Right?
Oh, well,
and if you do state transformations in React, right, when you set something on a component rather than doing it through reducers, then you don't have any insurances.
Well,
about it.
now you have Facebook's Flow. If you probably have checked it out,
Yes.
It allows you to basically use your existing ES6 compatible code and annotate them with types. So it does type inference, which means you're not going to get or have a less probability of running into runtime exceptions there.
Yeah, but you still have null
With
pointers.
those stuff, how would you see the future of Elm?
Well,
the
the future of Elm, I'm not trying to convince you guys to use Elm at all. I'm trying to convince you to make, good decisions when starting new projects. And if you know using TypeScript is the right thing, then go for that. If you know, I think that the landscape in the coming years will change a lot due to the work of Ben, for instance. That we're going to have a whole slew of different languages running on the web platform. So we shouldn't dig too deep in with JavaScript. I mean, JavaScript is not going to go away. Some say that's a bad thing, some say it's a good thing, right? But it's not going to go away, but still I think that you should consider looking at other alternatives as well.
Right.
That's
the other
all I'm
one
saying.
is that is the state management, is it built in with the language? If so, how? Or is it a separate library? Or is there a framework around that where you'd have to probably implement to a particular interface? Or
So is
Thank
the
you.
state management a part of the language? Well, yes and no. I mean, the language and the way that the language is used is kind of works together to form that. There's no like special package or framework or anything that you need to add. It's like using Elm is really bare bone. Usually, there's not a lot of stuff that needs to be added.
We have a final question over here.
How about the DOM updates? Because I guess if you said it was inspired by, no, React was inspired by Elm. So do you have like, since you have so
Redux.
many, sorry, yeah, okay. But if you have so many, I guess DOM updates because the data changes and then you want to have everything separate performant, how do you perform DOM manipulations based on state?
So how do you? Oh, that's a tough question. So how do you perform DOM manipulations based on state? Well, just like React, Elm produces a shadow DOM that it compares to the previous one, right? So it's the same kind of concept there. They can make a lot of shortcuts because, and that's why Elm is so fast. It's like a factor 5 compared to React, or at least last time I checked, you know, that was a week ago, so a lot of stuff can have happened since then in JavaScript, right? You know, but what they can do, since it's another language, right? They can make a lot of assumptions that you cannot do in React about things having changed, because you can control it a lot more tightly. So they skip many things that React, even though it would want to, just cannot, because it is running in JavaScript. And that's kind of my point, right? That they're just because of the language, no matter how many features and so on that you add in, you can never get out of this. Okay, thank you.